Have you recently bought the new Dark World structure deck and yet you just can't work out how to use it? Well, have I got the video for you. Today's video is all about how to play the Dark World structure deck. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of how to run Dark Worlds, how to run this deck specifically, what cards you want to be going for, what your search engine is, what your draw engine is, what cards you're looking for, what cards to get out, and how to win with the Dark World structure deck. So if you're interested in that, then keep watching. Okay, first things first, this deck unnecessarily has 44 cards in it, and structure decks are inconsistent enough as it is, so we're going to take out 4 cards from the deck. So my top recommendations for which cards to take out will be Rend, the Gatekeeper of Dark World, and Zur, the Knight of Dark World. This is just because these two are normal monsters, and so they don't really do anything. They have no synergy with the other Dark World cards except for their name, and yeah, they're really just strong level 4s. You don't need them in the deck though. You have a lot stronger options that are just as easy to summon rather. Next we're going to take out Braun, Mad King of Dark World. Braun is an effect monster, but he's not a great monster. Mainly he's just an 1800 point level 4. Again, we have better options, and his effect to inflict battle damage, you can discard 1 card. This isn't great. First of all, he has to inflict battle damage. Secondly, we just have a lot better options for discarding cards. And finally, Absolute King Backjack. This card is quite situational. During your opponent's turn, you can banish it from the graveyard, look at the top card of your deck, and if it's a normal trap, set it to your field. There are only 4 normal traps in this deck, and we plan to search them out with Lilith anyway, so Backjack is not really necessary. There's just not enough normal monsters to make this card feasible with this deck. Consistent is the word I was looking for. So those are the 4 cards to take out, limiting your deck down to 40 cards in the deck, and now we'll get into how to play the main cards. So, first of all, we'll go through the endgame of this deck. So this deck has 3 main bosses. We've got Grapha, Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This is of course the main fusion boss. He's a very powerful card, 3200 attack, and basically negates any card effect, well, any spell or trap or monster effect, which is fantastic. Next we've got Grapha, the Dragon Lord of Dark World. This is the classic Dark World boss monster from way back in the day when Dark Worlds were being used a lot. This card can be special summoned from the graveyard by returning any fiend monster from your field to your hand, which is fantastic. It's a very easy way to summon a 2700 attack point monster. So he's one of the main boss monsters. He's also a fusion component for Grapha. And finally, we have the new Rainbow Overking of Dark World. This works very similarly to Grapha. You can special summon him from the graveyard by returning a level 7 or lower fiend from your field to your hand, making him a fantastic boss monster option with 3000 attack as well. So the main strategy of this deck will be to go for one of these cards. Ideally, you want to bring out Grapha, the Dragon Overlord, but this is a little bit harder, so in order to bring him out, you're going to need Grapha, the Dragon Lord of Dark World, either on your field, graveyard, or in your hand. And finally, Rainbow is a better card than Grapha, I would say. However, he is not a component for Dragon Overlord, so the main thing you want to go for is Grapha first, then Dragon Overlord. However, Rainbow can use his effect to search out Grapha and get him to your hand, which you can then use to go into Grapha, Dragon Overlord of Dark World. And in order to do that, you're going to need Dark World Ascension. This is the second card that you want to be searching for after your Grapha. This card is a very powerful fusion spell, however it can only fuse by banishing materials from your field or graveyard, or discarding them from your hand. Obviously, you'll want to discard them from the hand to get off their discard effects, but banishing them isn't too bad either. So that's the main strategy of the deck. Get out these 3 monsters and just really go for the power kill on your opponent using Grapha to lock down their effects, and of course the other Grapha and Rainbow to just continually revive themselves, having 2 very powerful monsters on the field. Their discard effects aren't too bad either. For our next win condition, we have Skill Drain. Skill Drain, I shouldn't have to tell you, is a very powerful trap card. It negates the effects of all monsters on the field. This can cripple a lot of decks in today's game. Most decks, maybe not most, but a hell of a lot of decks just cannot handle Skill Drain. They have no way around it. However, with Dark Worlds, all our effects activate in the graveyard by discarding from the hand, so Skill Drain doesn't affect anything except for monsters like Grapha, the Dragon Overlord. Finally, we have a 4th boss monster. He's sort of a mini boss monster, but it is the original Rainbow Overlord of Dark World. This card is not fantastic. In fact, I probably wouldn't even run it in most Dark World decks. However, His effect is very powerful if it's discarded by an opponent's card effect, and if it is, then you can special summon it from the graveyard and destroy all monsters or all spell and trap cards that your opponent controls. However, it does have to be discarded by an opponent's card effect only, so that makes that a little bit weaker, but with this deck, I'll go over later, has a lot of options for forcing your opponent to discard your cards by their card effects. Speaking of those options, we're going to go into them right now. So we have firstly Ceruli, Guru of the Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card to your opponent's field in defense position. Yeah, and then if it was special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, either itself or another Dark World card, which we'll look into later, then your opponent discards one card. Meaning, if this card is summoned by its effect to your opponent's side of the field, then you discard a card via an opponent's card effect, getting off your Dark World's most powerful effects, like Rainbow, discard them, then destroy all monsters or all spell and traps. So Ceruli is a great option just for that. And his effect is, of course, not just for Rainbow, that's the main one, but all of your Dark World effects who have effects that go off when your opponent discards them. Next up we have Dark World Brainwashing. When your opponent activates a monster effect, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, you can target one Dark World monster on the field, return it to the hand, and if you do, the activated effect of your opponent's card becomes your opponent randomly discards one card. Meaning, this card basically negates your opponent's effect and gives you a bonus off of their effect, and this does cause discards by your opponent's card effects, getting off effects like Rainbow, and all of your other Dark World's most powerful effects. Dark World Brainwashing is a very powerful card, just keep in mind you do need 3 cards in the hand to use its effect. The final card for forcing your opponent to discard your cards is the boss monster himself, Grapha, Dragon Overlord of Dark World. This card has a very powerful effect. When your opponent activates a monster effect, or a normal spell or trap card, while you have the cards in your hand, quick effect, you can activate this effect. The activated effect of your opponent's card becomes your opponent discards one card, meaning, once again, this card basically negates your opponent's card and forces them to make you discard a card, getting off effects like Rainbow and all of your Dark World's most powerful effects. So that is the final point of that strategy. That is why we have these cards. That is why Rainbow can be used and is actually somewhat decent in this deck, and is of course the main negation that this deck goes through. Okay, so next we're going to go through the structure deck's main draw engine. So the first draw card we have is the Gates of Dark World. This card, all Fiend monsters gain 300 attack and defense, which is great for starters, and once per turn you can banish a Fiend monster from your graveyard to discard one Fiend monster in your hand, and then draw one card. This card can be searched by Genta, the Gateman of Dark World. He discards himself to search the Gates of Dark World, and can be used once per turn to draw an extra card. Next up we have a very powerful new card, Dark World Archives. This is one of the best cards that comes with the deck. Dark World Archives, during your main phase you can discard a Dark World monster, and if you do, Dark World monsters you currently control gain attack equal to the level of the discarded monster that it had in the hand times 100 until the end of the turn. So that is already a powerful effect that allows you to discard your Dark World monsters and boost your monster's attack points, but the second effect is where it really shines. If a monster whose original type is Fiend is discarded from your hand by the effect of a Dark World card or an opponent's card effect, even during the damage step, you can discard one card to then draw 2 cards. You can only use each effect of Dark World Archives once per turn. This is absolutely insane. So this card can first cause you to discard a Fiend monster, let's say Grapha, and then with its other effect you can discard another card to draw 2 more cards. That is completely insane, and both of those effects get off your Dark World's discard effects, which is just ridiculous. It's absolutely it's mad, it's insane. And I assume that this effect can be used during your opponent's turn as well, though correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the implication that even during the damage step means it works on your opponent's turn as well. This card is crazy. This is the most powerful draw card in the deck, along with the Gates of Dark World. These two combined are very powerful for letting you draw out your entire deck and search the rest of your cards. So if you don't know how dangers work, the dangers are a very powerful draw engine. They each have the effect that you can reveal it in your hand, then your opponent randomly selects one card in your hand. That card then gets discarded, and if it was not the card that was revealed initially, you then summon that card and draw one card. So obviously, this effect is very powerful in Dark Worlds because it forces your opponent to discard a card in your hand, which could be, not that one, that's no good to you, which could be anything such as Grapha, which will then get off your Grapha's effect when it's discarded, or you can just discard anything else, allowing you to draw a card. If you discard Danger Mothman, he also lets you draw a card and discard a card when he's discarded. Tsuchinoko special summons itself when it's discarded by a card effect, and they all do things when they're discarded by card effects. But if you don't, if your opponent misses it, then you get to draw a card, you get to special summon a reasonably powerful monster, except for these two. And yeah, it's just a great draw engine. I'm sure you already know how it works, but that's the basics of it. Reveal, randomly select, if they get it wrong, special summon, and draw a card. Next up, we have the basic draw spells that come with this deck. We've got Card Destruction, a very powerful card, forcing both players to discard their hand and draw the same number of cards. We've got Drag Down into the Grave, which lets both players look at their opponent's card, choose one card to discard, and then draw a card. This is also fantastic for looking at your opponent's hand and getting rid of their powerful cards, such as their hand traps, like their Ash Blossom, and you can set up your hand so that they're forced to discard a Dark World monster. And finally, we have, of course, Dark World Dealings. This forces each player to draw one card and then discard a card. Finally, for our draw engine, we of course have Growl, the Huntsman of Dark World. When this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to draw a card. This obviously has great synergy with all of the cards that we talked about before. Anything that discards your Fiends, your Dark Worlds from your hand to the graveyard, activates Growl's effect. And if he's discarded by an opponent's card effect, you get to draw 2 cards instead, which again has synergy with all the cards that negate your opponent's card effects and forces you to discard by their effect. And it also just has synergy with any card that, any card your opponent would choose that would cause you to discard. Next up, I would like to talk about Lilith, Lady of Lament. This card is not fantastic for the deck. We have 4 normal traps in this deck. She can search out one of them. So with Lilith's effect, you tribute a dark monster, which includes herself if you wish. Then you select 3 normal traps from your deck. You have 4 options to choose from. Your opponent randomly selects one and that card gets set to your field. The rest go to the deck. So all 3 of these normal traps are fairly decent for the deck. The weakest one, I would say, is the Forces of Darkness, which just adds 2 Dark World monsters in your graveyard to the hand. This isn't a great effect, but it can have a lot of tech options, especially if you need cards in your hand to discard via Dragon Overlord's effect, or just for, where was it, Dark World Brainwashing? Where did I put that? Yeah, or for Dark World Brainwashing, which requires you to have 3 cards in your hand. Forces of Darkness is obviously very helpful for that. However, the best options would be these 3 to go with. Deck Devastation is very powerful and works well with your Grapha or your Rainbow Overking, because you can just tribute one of these cards, either this or Grapha, and then get its effect off. And then, of course, with this effect, you can then bring it back to the field, which is fantastic. Works well with Lilith, Lady of Lament as well. You can tribute this card, set one of these, and then return Lilith to the hand, allowing you to special summon your Rainbow or your Grapha. Next to talk about is, of course, Mind Crush. This is a great card being used in a lot of decks nowadays. You can call out your opponent, say their Ash Blossom or any of the hand traps that you think they have, or if they add a card to your hand, you can then declare that card and force them to discard. If you have no idea what your opponent is playing, then it just lets you discard one random card, which you would set up your hand to make that random card be a Dark World card, and then get off its effect. Finally, we have Paleozoic Dynamiscus. This card, when activated, you can target a face-up card on the field, discard one card, and if you do, banish that card that you targeted, and then it can be special summoned from the graveyard as a monster. This, of course, banishes your opponent's card, lets you discard a monster, and of course that discarded card, if it's a Dark World, you get off that effect, which is fantastic. Last card I want to talk about is Snow, Unlight of Dark World. This is our main search card. When she's discarded, you can add a Dark World card from your deck to your hand. The rest of the cards are really just play by ear. We have Dark World Punishment, which is a very powerful card that negates a normal or special summon. We have Dark World Puppetry, which resets, which banishes cards in your graveyard, and then you can discard a Fiend monster, which is fantastic. It's also a quick effect. Also, during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of your banished Fiend monsters and add it to your hand. This obviously works with its own effect, which lets you banish cards from the graveyard, and of course with the Gates of Dark World, which you need to discard to use its effect. With Gates of Dark World, which you need to banish Fiends from your graveyard to use its effect. For the rest of it, it really is just play by ear. The main strategy of Dark Worlds, other than all of that of course, is to discard them from your hand. Now keep in mind that discard and send to the graveyard are two different words, they mean two different things. Make sure that your card effects do say discard if you want to use your Dark World effects. Now each Dark World has two effects. Well, not each Dark World, most Dark Worlds. This is a bad example. Most Dark Worlds have two effects. One that activates when they're discarded by any card, and one that activates specifically when your opponent discards them. We've talked about this before, but just keep that in mind because sometimes the wording on the Dark Worlds is quite confusing. It'll say something like, if this card is discarded, well, let me look for a specific example. Gold, for example. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, if it was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, special summon this card, then destroy those targets if any. That is very confusing wording, so basically the way that gold works, and this will hopefully clear up the wording for the rest of the cards in the deck, is if this card is discarded to the graveyard by your card effect, you can special summon it. Great. If it was discarded to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can destroy 2 of their cards and special summon it. You still get to special summon it either way, but you can also special summon it even if it wasn't discarded by an opponent's card effect. I hope that cleared that up. It is a bit confusing, but what you're looking for is the colon and the semicolon. The colon, right after effect there is a colon that will tell you what happens if your opponent discards it, and then after that there is a semicolon, which is after controls, which you can't really see. Yuri put it on screen. After controls there is a semicolon that will tell you what happens either way when it's discarded by any card effect. Alright, so that was the basic strategy of the Dark World structure deck. I hope this video was useful to you. If it was, then be sure to leave a like and a comment down below to let me know and to, let me know to continue doing videos like this. Also, comment any questions that you have. You can also ask me on Discord by joining the Discord server, link at the bottom of the description. So thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to you. Leave a like, subscribe, comment below, and share this video with a friend who has bought the Dark World structure deck, and this video might be useful to them. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name has been Senkara, and until next time, see ya.